Hello everyone, I am Tacit and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Dead Grubbing event in which the Count Gobula is added to the game. So this week has quite a few things going on. Of course, one of the more noteworthy things is the 9.0 patch is tomorrow, or should be sometime within the next day or so. It is going to be bringing a bunch of improvements and expansions to that of the Underspire. Keep in mind, it is perfectly safe to run your Underspire now, as all these effects do not take place until next week's Monday, so 1 week from today, even though we're likely getting the update by tomorrow. But it's going to be adding a bunch of extra variety once it does come to next week. Things like the trap rooms, things like the treasure rooms to be able to get a bunch more loot, things to be able to scout out the place, things to get more power-ups as well as just free resources, and even connecting paths to potentially be able to go and get a little bit deeper than you otherwise would be able to be able to save a bunch of torches. There'll also be a bunch of achievements that will end up coming through it, though of course all of which would not be able to be done until the actual thing ends up hitting on the following Monday, one of which should be doable within probably one or a few of the event weeks, whereas the other one could take anywhere upwards of 5, as some rooms can only appear literally 0 times, as it's a variable how many they can appear, and 2 of them that they have achievements can either appear 0 or 1 times per week, meaning it could take 5 weeks if you get lucky on them, or otherwise could take literal months to go and hunt them down if you get unlucky on them. As far as the update when it ends up hitting tomorrow, most of it will only end up affecting all the general and bug fixes, whereas everything else will end up applying to the following week's Monday, when we'll actually be able to go and do all this new Underspire expansions, which we'll go over more once it actually ends up hitting the game. Beyond that, we have quite a few things going on this week. We have a fantastic event key drop table, so great time to be using event keys if you don't have some of the things in there. The new Glory Troop is actually usable for once, and pretty solid. Among one of the better bleeders in the game. Also being pretty good with goblins and just in general. And of course, if you still want to get the mythic that we covered a video for on last Friday, it is still in the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chest for the next 4 days. It's really good on really heavy purple teams, but beyond that, you're pretty much not really going to be using it due to its really low damage output. But it can kind of be the connecting troop, 4th troop on purple heavy teams. So if you want to have it for that, or just for kingdom upgrading purposes, is still available for the next 4 days. Or otherwise, if you already got it or don't want to end up getting it, make sure to save all your keys until Friday and wait until then so you get the full general drop table as far as the drop table is concerned. So where should we start? Let's go with so raid event. As far as the raid event, it is a double magic, double score on the new guy over here, the Lord Gopthi. The main thing I want to show with him before we go over to the teams is the weapon and him are actually really solid. As far as the boss slayer is auto extra turn, it is the second one that ended up getting this. However, the other one that got auto extra turn, basically the only benefit it got was the auto extra turn. However, this is auto extra turn and boost ratio based on bleed. So out of all the boss troops that if you were to use in general purposes, this is pretty much the strongest one other than the other one that also has this effect. As if you're using this, for example, to kill actual enemy bosses, like for that of Underspire on this week or any week for that matter, as well as just enemy troops that happen to be running a boss specific troop. Any of these that have this auto extra turn have a lot of value, and this one has even more damage than the other one, though of course that having the caveat of actually needing bleed gems, which on a normal team probably not really getting much value from. But yeah, any of these that ever have this extra turn is really good for general boss killing, which does come into play outside this game mode a little bit, as there are a handful of boss troops that are still ran in the current state of the game that you can end up hard countering. Then of course, don't forget to get the weapon here. While there are some weapons also worth getting in Soulforge this week, most notably Norbert's Turnip. Dead End you definitely want to get just by throwing the gems at the current event. Ends up exploding a bunch of green gems and grants a random status effect to all Zasian allies, which works really well. So you could even use this with the non-goblin ones, as there are a few that you can end up doing that with, like Black Beast, and keep devouring whatever it keeps summoning, and just get one really heavy Black Beast that keeps giving status effects to it. So it has some benefits compared to just a goblin one. Unfortunately, it does not have auto extra turn like the Norbert's Turnip, but has a few good things. As a mana drain, has Death Mark the first enemy, so stuff like that, not awful. But yeah, pretty standard exploding weapon, but still pretty useful for stuff like this event week, and really easy to go get just from throwing some gems at the current event. So as far as all the teams, which will be in the pinned comment, let's start all the way from the top, of course. As far as raid teams are concerned, we have to use specifically goblins from, or just goblins in general. So this is mostly just going to be pure Zasian teams, as of course all the really good goblins tend to be all in Zasian. Quite a few different ways that we can end up building around this, depending on what you want to end up doing. But But one main ways you could end up doing it around is Gob Truffle. Gob Truffle has really good extra turn rate, feeds mana back to himself, and does a lot of damage to all enemies while having auto extra turn. Ends up mana accumulating into itself and then one other option. Given that it does brown, one really good synergy for this is to basically for all the teams end up making a Norbert's Turnip into Keen Gob Truffle. If you don't have a Norbert's Turnip, it is available in Soulforge this week. The main thing that's noteworthy about it is if you just look at the weapon itself, it looks pretty standard. However, the main big benefit that it gets is auto extra turn, a very, very strong ability to have on any weapon or on anything in general. And you do need to get it fully maxed out at level 9 to end up doing that. So throw the orbs and everything else that you have to go and get it there. But once you do end up doing so, it has that auto extra turn, which is very, very potent. Ends up creating a bunch of green and red, with the most noteworthy thing being that it creates a bunch of green, which then feeds into Truffle. Truffle creates green and brown, which of course feeds into itself and then back into the Turnip. And you just keep going back and forth. You have to use Lord Gopthi because he's required for double points. And then it's basically just one other alternative depending on what you want. You could go things like Iron Gut for the insta-kill. You can go thing like Boom Pile for it to explode, just for a little bit extra turn damage. Pretty much anything just to kind of offset, and that's pretty much the game plan for the high rarity team. When we bring it down to lower one, we actually use all the new stuff that basically came out today and just throwing a Truffle on it. But otherwise, it's all 3 things that came out today. And this is our first chance that we get to look at the Glory Troop, and it is actually really good. Keep in mind, he is not the Select Shiny. It is the Ray Troop, unfortunately. So that's another thing that makes the Ray Troop even stronger as far as a boss slayer. So much so, I might even go and upgrade it. I almost forgot about that. Because, of course, anything that's considered a boss... can I just type in boss here? I think we can, yeah. So anything that's considered a boss, if we go over base rarity here. So if you ever see someone running a Catharix, some of these dragons, Maelstrom Dagonov's actually a really relevant one. For killing it out. But basically, anytime that you ever see one of these troops and you're allowed to use a given troop, Lord Gopthi is basically the best way to go now. Not only does his shininess bring him down to only a 10 mana cost, but he has auto extra turn, a decent amount of extra damage, and whatever on earth his extra effect does, I guess it just makes his bleed probably stronger as far as his boost ratio. But even ignoring all that, having an 11 or even 10 mana cost extra turn raid killing troop is so good to have for killing Maelstrom Dagonov, for killing Catharix, for killing basically anything that ever has the boss category. Unfortunately, they haven't been doing this to too many broken things, like all the flower dragons, for example, do not count as bosses. But I would say the main counter that you'd be using that for in the future is any situation where you are allowed to use it against Maelstrom Dagonov, as you can simply just kill it out outright, get auto extra turn. Is basically a 4 versus 3 with a free troop on your team using the Lord Gopthi. So overall, probably the strongest raid troop we've ever had, at least in that regard, for killing things like Maelstrom Dagonov, Catharix, and similar options that might exist in the future. So potentially worth trying to get some of those shininess on him. Or if nothing else, at least you get the shininess from if your guild ends up completing out the event, you get him down to 11 mana cost instead of 12, which is already a decent amount of benefit for him. Anyways, beyond that, oh yeah, back to teams. So we're just going over how strong he was. But yeah, Count Gobula, he ends up creating a mix of green and bleed. Bleed gems being, of course, purple, and green being obviously green. But as auto extra turn, this is the same mixture of what Truffle does as far as number, just without the boost ratio to do a little bit extra. And of course, the main gimmick here is that it ends up feeding green into all of your goblins. Purple not really being used too much here, but it does end up feeding into the raid troop this time around, so you can end up doing it that way. And then we're basically just spamming the dead end off of Truffle and just doing Truffle into dead end rather than Truffle into Turnip here. This is mostly just have backup resummon. We're using this with a stealthy hero class with Thief, which not only gives you a bunch of bonuses because it's 4 times Asian and 4 times Goblin, but on top of all that, you will also be gaining Stealthy on your hero. The reason why this is relevant, of course, is during raid events. They do have insta-kill, and it is single target insta-kill, so this will force them to have to kill everything on your team that isn't hero while having resummon off your weapon. So it might kill out multiple things in your troop, might even kill your raid troop out before you can kill it, but then you can just keep resummoning troops over and over again with your dead end weapon, and by the end of the battle, you should be able to just cheese it by constantly resummoning with your weapon. If you want to make it even a little bit safer, you can even move it a little bit further back, though we are using a little bit for its 30% scroll dodge that ends up getting on its second to last perk there as well. So that's pretty much the game plan. If they keep killing out your troop, you just keep resummoning. You have stealthy on this, so it'll end up getting targeted, and you just keep restructuring your team whenever it ends up taking losses anywhere on the team. As far as the faction event, there are 2 of them this week. The first one is Amethyrax for tomorrow on Tuesday. This is a green-brown restriction. With that being said, we can run a relatively standard Rowan build, just doing double Leprechaun Fort instead of Mirage Queen, as we do not have access to Mirage Queen. For the high rarity, we of course could just run any double insta-kill build. For this, we're running Wand of Stars with Hero with a Leprechaun, just to get a bunch of mana accumulation going. And for our 2 insta-kills, we happen to be doing Maelstrom, Dagannoth, and Hiking Iron Gut, but of course you could use whatever you have access to for it. As far as pure faction, is a nice diverse team for King Gob Truffles. Unfortunately, the 5th faction troop, while slightly tanky, does not end up gaining any durability, only gains attack. So it is still worthwhile just to run all in on 4 Truffles. And as long as you have at least 3 Truffles going to the final fight, you should be perfectly fine. Even with 2, you should be fine. Generally, the way to do this is to try to get 2 on any battle, is to get 2 or 3 of them to full mana, and then start casting them so you can start to stack a little bit more of the extra mana. Whereas if you only cast 1, it's very unlikely that you're going to get any amount of mana back to recast. But if you cast 2, 3, or even all 4 of them, it is very likely you'll get 2 or 3 of them back that you'll get to full mana, and then be able to keep looping them from there. And that's pretty much the whole game plan for the pure faction. As far as the thief class, this is specifically goblins from that of Zhejian. With that being said, you're basically just going as many Zard boom piles as you have, or how many ever goblin rockets you have, feeding into the best red weapon you have. The strongest option here is to do a ruby weapon if you happen to have access to it. Next downgrade would be Dawnbringer, and if you don't have that, you could use Summer's Fury and just change up the banner and class a little bit. And of course, if you have enough boom piles, run 3 of them. Otherwise, replace every boom pile with a goblin rocket, or goblin rocket with a boom pile, depending on what you have, in order to feed into your weapon. But most ideal would be 2 to 3 boom piles with like 1 other goblin, or even just all 3 boom piles, in order to go and get a bunch of mana accumulation for your weapon. As far as Underspire is concerned, this is specifically a just a Zin restriction, and we don't have to worry about having to use the raid troop or anything specific. For this, we're running a Hiking Iron Gut insta-kill build. We have Hiking Iron Gut for its Devourer, but also to end up boosting it up, we have Cauldron. Ends up giving some life to an ally, but most notably doubles their attack. So basically you go get 1 Devourer with your Hiking Iron Gut, you then go and get a ridiculously high attack value because you're stealing all their stats. And then with the ridiculously high attack value you have, you could just double it up. And then every single skull you take will pretty much be one-shotting, 2-shotting every single enemy that you end up facing. Flaming On uses here for mana accumulation and for resummon if you happen to need it for some reason. Exarch's Boom Pile just here for a little bit of extra mana accumulation in order to get those 2 explodes every single turn. That's pretty much the game plan with our high rarity team for Underspire. Low rarity, we're basically going all in once again with Norbert's Turnip and a King Gob Truffle. King Gob Truffle, not sure if I mentioned it yet, but of course you throw Chaos Shards at Amethyrax on any day and you can end up getting it. If you don't have the shards to do so, you can just get it from the daily today and tomorrow into the Tuesday faction event tomorrow, and just throw Chaos Shards and Amethyrax then, and go and get yourself copies of him. He's a really strong extra turn looping troop, very similar to Beatrix, but a lot more consistent in its extra turning, with the biggest downside it being that it doesn't have cleanse, but it does make up for it by having a far more consistent extra turn rate. And we're just doing that with the extra turn Turnip in order to feed back and forth. The Fun Dingus is mostly just here for a little bit extra mana accumulation and to offset the coloration, as Norbert's Turnip does create red, and we kind of want to have something to feed a little bit of red into, so we're just feeding it into the Fungus thing. And then, of course, we have the faction event for this weekend. So this is a little bit different than the other one, of course. We're getting Crypt Keepers. We'll be getting at 6 troop. The 6 troop ends up creating a bunch of purple, but unfortunately the most useful thing from the kingdom is a red-blue that has insta-kill. And because of that, you'd basically still run the same team as before, which I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. But yeah, it's still 3 Lady Maranas with a Grave Seer. The new 6 troop that's coming out is not worth running. All it does is create a bunch of purple. And while there are things that use purple here, it's generally best just to go down the insta-kill route and slowly whittle them down. The only reason why you even run a single Grave Seer, even though it creates purple that you don't need, is not because you would necessarily need the purple for like the boost ratio or something, but it's simply to counter out the enemy's Grave Seer on both the first and final battle, because even though your team doesn't use purple, the enemy team's does, so you need to counter out their Grave Seer by casting when it's favorable, in order to make sure that their Grave Seer doesn't cast when it's favorable. And it's pretty much the only reason why it's on the team, is not because you actually need it, but because you need to counter the enemy's Grave Seer on both the first and final battle from the really high amount of true damage that you would end up taking from that one purple enemy there. And it's pretty much the game plan with the pure faction. As far as the lower rarity stuff, it is red-purple restriction, so we could run a pretty standard Atlanta quick heal team just using a Leprechaun. You get to get them up with their 75% mana start really quick just to go and get a kill with that. And then for the mid-rarity team, I figured I'd show this. This team we actually run every single day as far as dailies, but I figured we show it for faction. It works really good around the 100 to 300 range. If you're going all the way to 500, you might want to switch to an insta-kill related team. But of course, standard Flower Dragon build. using Wand of Stars to get mana accumulation off the ground. Flower Dragon is the best overall damage source in the entire game right now. Can be replaced with Stellarix as well if you don't have Flower Dragon yet. And then double Shaka in order to go and feed it a bunch of mana accumulation with its wild card, as well as just having a decent amount of pickup damage if they happen to revive or anything, as it can pretty much always one-shot the revive, given that it double taps it with a very high amount of true damage. And that's all the teams, all which are in the pinned comment and description if you want to go and copy-paste any of them. So let's go make our rounds. First things first, Soulforge. Nothing really worthwhile to craft, legend, and mythic-wise. Though keep in mind, of course, it does rotate on Fridays as well, so keep an eye out for if there's anything worthwhile getting there. If you were to craft any of these, I would say the only one kind of maybe worthwhile is Huanglong. There are some really niche situations where you end up bringing it out for Shantang, but it's very random, very luck-based, and due to its extremely high inconsistency, is pretty much not ever ran unless you absolutely have to. So for the most part, not really that high of a priority. And even if this was an, once it comes down to the point where you would potentially need something like this, it's probably going to be in the event key drop table, since the only thing it's really ran for is Shantang anyway. So might as well just wait until then if you are going to be doing that. And speaking of which, event key drop table is really solid this week. I actually might need to go do that next, as is pretty good. But as far as weapons are concerned, Norbert's Turnip, do not leave this week without it. It is absurdly good. One of the best top 5 weapons in the entire game. It has auto extra turn, as we were going over earlier. A little bit of extra mana drain to the first enemy, because why not? Make it even stronger. It ends up dealing a bunch of damage to an enemy, boosted by goblin allies, and then creates a mix of green and red. It is used pretty much exclusively on 4x goblin teams, but it makes some of the most infinite loop teams ever out of almost any combination of goblins. You could just open like literally 10 random event keys, and those 10 random troops, whatever ones you end up getting, probably makes a viable team with Norbert's Turnip. So really good in early game to go build a team that can pretty much last you the entire game. You just get yourself Norbert's Turnip this week by crafting it for all these resources. You then go through some small amount of event keys, and boom, you got yourself a team. We could even show that right now. Like if we go and open, let's say 50, since I can't do 10 at a time right now. But if we do 50, we could literally go just find a team out of something here. We could use Sir Snothelm to go and disable them out with a web mechanic. We can go and do a bunch of mana accumulation off of Goblin Rocket, and then probably something else in here somewhere. Where's it hiding? Of course, we wouldn't get a 4th good trip to go with it. Oh, well. Out of all the goblins here, you're not going to give me a 4th? I forgot. So many of these get replaced with the other resources, too. But it shouldn't take that many. You probably already have stuff laying around as well. That would end up working out really good for it. Oh, yeah, we also have the new guy that came out this week, too, with all the glory stuff with it. But there's just so many things in this kingdom that have auto extra turn. Almost every single goblin here, regardless of the overall viability of their ability, pretty much all have extra turn on their ability. So you can end up making some really good synergy teams as far as getting your mana accumulation up, getting a mana loop going, and with all their extra turns, as long as nothing is frozen on your team, you can pretty much just keep going infinitely in a lot of circumstances and just keep whittling them down with your amount of damage. Goblins don't have the quickest amount of damage in the game, but they're really good at just infinitely doing damage. So it might not be the quickest wins you're ever going to have, but they're really consistent at winning, which is really good. So great week to be throwing down event keys to go get all of these things. So as far as everything that you can get from event key drop table, a lot of amazing things. However, the things that are not in drop table include the 5 faction troops from the Amethyrex. Those are only from throwing Kier shards at the Amethyrex faction in Underworld. As far as other things that are not in drop table, keep in mind Lord Gobthi, while he will be in the drop table in the future, is not in drop table this week. So if you want to go and end up getting him, you have to get him from the current raid shop in the game. Other things that are not in drop table includes the Fool, which is only in the Vault Key drop table, though of course we just had a Vault weekend, so pretty easy to get it from those then. And that is it as far as things not in drop table. Things that are in drop table that are worth it is basically everything else. Almost every troop in this entire kingdom, if it has the word gain extra turn on it and it has 100% rate, is viable under pretty much some circumstance. There's also a few other things that are sometimes usable as well, like Black Beasts, which has some very niche use cases, which has even more use cases with the new weapon that came out today from the raid event. So that new raid weapon with Black Beast and like 2 other things from this kingdom. Really strong team. I didn't show that for the Underspire team, of course, but really solid option if you want to go with that now, as he has that nice explodey weapon. We'll gain these stats effects from it, and he just keeps boosting up over and over again, gaining stats from your summons. But as far as what you're really looking for, you're looking to pick up basically any mythic. There's really no wrong option here. I would say Fairy Godmother is probably the weakest one though, mostly because if you want to do Wish Gem mechanic, you're actually better off with the Epic that they end up adding. That also has shininess applied to him, which made him even better. Where is he? Yeah, it is. Merc, Lurk, and Dirk. Generally, she got really outclassed by this lower rarity option due to it having Wish Gem on stability. Doesn't have it on trait like she does, but he has a much better ability overall than what she does for a fraction of the cost, only 11 compared to 22, literally half the cost, assuming you have it max shiny. Even if you don't, it's still very strong compared to her. So she's the only one that's kind of irrelevant just because he basically does what she does better. But the other three are absurdly good. Flaming Ani, it basically resummons your entire team if there's any troops missing into a bunch of goblins that are all viable for the most part, and then does a bunch of mana accumulation with auto extra turn. You have things like High King Iron Gut, which is one of the better insta-kill team troops in the entire game. While it's not as good as something like Maelstrom Dagonoff's Infinite Loop, which is a little bit more recent, one nice benefit of High King Iron Gut is he does get to gain all the stats of the enemies, most notably the attack value. So if you have him in the first slot, he can stack up a lot of attack over time, and he's generally tanky enough that he's not really going to be killed, compared to something like Maelstrom Dagonoff, where a single Raid Slayer hits him once and he just auto dies, whereas High King Iron Gut can keep bulking up throughout the entirety of the battle. Unlike Maelstrom Dagonoff, that's really high damage, but pretty flimsy. It's pretty squishy as far as how quickly it can die. And Zarg's Boom Pile, while not the best mana accumulator as far as final traits, it is decent. There are instances that you use it, like event weeks like this, or in pure goblin teams and a few other niche situations, but ends up exploding 2 skulls when its turn begins while having an auto extra turn ability that has some pretty decent board control. It's weaker than Takshaka, it's weaker than things like Pharaoh, but it's still not bad, and it still gets use cases. It's probably like the 5th best mana accumulator that does like something per turn, somewhere around there. So it's definitely worth getting, even though it's not as good as some of the other options. There's just a lot of niche situations where you can bring it out. It's also a construct, which is pretty noteworthy because you can use Geomancer to get 50% mana start. I believe I even did that on a couple of the teams. I didn't really mention it as I was going over them. But for example, one of these I end up doing it on, I know for sure. Where is it? I know I put it somewhere here. Where did I put it? Oh yeah, I put it on the highest rarity raid event team. So we're actually using Geomancer here, and the main reason for this is, of course, it gives 50% mana start to all constructs, also being really tanky as a first slot option. But of course, Zarg's Boom Pile is a construct, so you do get him to 50% mana start, only needing 12 instead of his normal full amount of mana. So he has some synergy for constructs as well outside of just Goblin. So he's really good in Zacian, Goblin, and Construct. But yeah, you can't really go wrong, I guess, unless you get Fairy Godmother. But you got a really high chance that if you do get a Mythic, it's going to be one of the more viable ones in the entire game. So worthwhile gambling event keys to go and bolster up a nice Goblin team, especially if you're a newer player that doesn't have a lot of these. It's some of the strongest troops in the entire game. A lot of utility troops they can end up getting from this kingdom just due to all of them having extra turn. Obviously very hard countered by things like freeze, but for the most part, as long as you can get past that, you should be fine, especially in battles that don't end up having any freeze at all, or game modes in general that don't really have that much freeze. Beyond that, other things that we have going on this week. Oh yeah, I almost forgot the Christmas event started next week. Not this week. Wow, we got a lot of things going on next week. Next week basically starts version 9.0, even though we're getting the update tomorrow, but a lot of it will actually initialize for the Underspire. But we're also getting the Christmas event starting then. Wow, we got a really busy next Monday then, as well as the whole week. But anyways, things that we have going on this week. Tuesday, as we mentioned, Amethyst faction. This is a green-brown restriction. Wednesday, we're getting one of the old pets for that of Zacian. Thursday is the Thief Hero class. Very decent hero class. I feel like I don't use it too often, but it is really strong. It has stealthy, has 7% chance to insta-kill whenever you get a kill. It counts as a goblin, so whenever you're using Norbert's Turnip, it is pretty much required to get the full boost ratio. And yeah, just a really nice mixed insta-kill into just synergy kind of troop. Mostly has a lot of damage, but still has decent amount of tankiness with things like stealthy and 30% skull dodge. Kind of covers all your bases. It's very rarely your strongest option unless you're building a 4x Goblin team, but in the context of a 4x Goblin team, it is very strong with Norbert's Turnip in the main time that you ever bring it out. And even outside of Goblin event weeks like this with Zacian, it is still worth running. It just happened to be ran pretty much with Goblin teams, but Goblin teams can be ran whenever. And then Friday, we have ourselves a new faction troop coming in with the Deep Delve of Crypt Keepers, which is a red-purple restriction. And we'll also be getting the update tomorrow, which most of the update doesn't really affect some stuff. There'll be a couple bug fixes. There'll be some visual changes to Underspire. But keep in mind, you can do the Underspire battles this week at any point, as even though the next update is related to Underspire, it will not take effect until the following Monday. There will be some visual changes here that will start as of tomorrow. But as far as the actual gameplay changes coming with 9.0, it will not start till next week's Monday at reset time. So it doesn't actually affect this week's event, so you're safe to do your battles whenever so it doesn't get glitched like last time, because they did one midway through one of the other times and it got absurdly glitchy, but they learned from last time, and it's going to be starting on next week's Monday, and hopefully will not cause a bunch of issues starting tomorrow. We'll find out. It hopefully shouldn't, fingers crossed. Anyways, beyond that, what else have we not got over? Soulforge, Underspire, other things here. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Guild, just a raid event. Obviously double magic, double score on this guy. Really good guy to go and get up. He is in the shiny key drop table, so potentially worth considering to upgrade, as he's going to be really useful in the future. But keep in mind, you will get, as long as you get to portal 12 in your guild, you'll be getting them shiny level 1 anyways, which brings them down from 12 mana cost to 11. So you don't really have to go that far out of your way, because the extra boost ratio is going to be from shiny level 2. It's probably just extra bleed ratio, which isn't really going to help him much. And in the kind of context that you would use him in the future, aka killing a Maelstrom Dagonoth or something similar with it, you're not really going to need that bleed boost ratio, because you're likely not using him with bleed. The only reason you'd really want to upgrade him is if you want to have a 10 mana cost instead of 11. But honestly, I feel like that's a little overkill. Just getting this to get him down to 11 mana cost is going to be fine for killing Maelstrom Dagonoth and similar things in the future whenever they come up, Catharix, any future boss trip that's useful. But he's going to be among one of the best, if not the best, options for doing that in the future, due to his auto extra turn into high damage output, into lowest mana cost of any raid troop that does that. As the other one that has that ability does not have shininess, so he doesn't have that extra mana reduction. Event keys, of course, really good to go and end up throwing, especially if you're a newer player. And then the only other thing, which we kind of already went over earlier, is Count Gobula. So, of course, if you need to stock up on green reds, best time to do so. They're only effectively 200 glory each. And this guy, yeah, not that bad. He creates a mix of green and bleed at a similar boost ratio of truffle for green and brown, just without any additional extra mana. But, of course, similar to him, also has gain and auto extra turn. This is pretty decent for bleeding, as you are on average creating 7 purple bleed gems. And assuming that you eventually end up taking all of them from the board, you will end up getting almost 2 stacks of bleed on all enemies, meaning that if you were to cast them 3 times, you're very likely to put a 4-time stack of bleed on all enemies, effectively doing 10 bleed damage to all enemies per turn. The only big downside of that is, given that you're extra turn spamming most likely with any goblin team that is being used on, you're probably not getting too many turns being lost to even be able to do that 10 bleed damage to all enemies per turn. And of course, it can also backfire on your team to be able to bleed, as most goblins do not have immune to bleed, so it could backfire inversely and end up doing 10 bleed damage to your entire team per turn as well. So there is that kind of factor with it. But for the most part, it's not too bad. It's going to be very niche as far as when it gets brought out. It would have definitely been a lot more viable if it was the shiny trip this week. If it had like a stronger effect from our gem spam into 12 mana cost, that'd be a very different trip than what it is now. But it'll still have some occasional use cases as far as boost ratio and bleed and such. But outside of that context, there are better goblins out there. While he is strong, there are so many stronger goblins. So while he is decent, it's just not going to get used that much unless you're specifically using him to utilize his bleed boost ratio. But if nothing else, really easy to get this week. Since Glory is really easy to come by, you probably got a bunch from Vault Event Weekend. And of course, you could even open the Vault Keys to try to get some that way. Actually, never mind. Vault Keys don't have Glory in them. Only the Glory Gnome thing does. But hopefully you got a bunch during the last event from the Vault Event Weekend. Otherwise, you could get it from PvP there or from opening your keys and everything. But anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up for now. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. All the teams mentioned were in the pinned comment and description. And I'll catch all of you guys later. Goodbye, everyone. And thanks for watching.